And for the Gospels in particular, like these 4 biographies of Jesus' life, they're the ones that the early Jesus community agrees upon the most because the disciples of Jesus had disciples. They're called the Apostolic Fathers.
Right.
So there were people who, like Peter and John and Paul, discipled themselves. And then those people talk about, okay, I heard John say this. I heard, so and they give credibility. So there's this like direct chain of succession and line of custody to the apostolic community.
But you catching this, Sajid? You catching this?
It's just anonymous, and it wasn't until the Council of Nicaea, and then finally the book of the Council of Nicaea was removed from the Bible, and
that's what you sound like. You sound like Sneeko level. In fact, Sajid, I would bet Sneeko actually knows more than you at this point and could speak more accurately. And that's the guy who, like, a year and a half ago was telling us about the book of the Council of Nicaea being removed from the Bible and stuff. I would say he knows more about Christianity now than you do. That's how bad you've gotten.
I think you really don't like Sajid anymore, man.
I've done nothing but compliment the dude for years, and then I think, wow, he's I'll go ahead and let me put it this way. There are people who are ignorant and gullible and even dumb and so on, and when they're responding to, and then you have another category, you have crazy. So like Kanye, I've said before, I don't get like outraged against Kanye because I think he actually is mentally ill. I think he's mentally ill. Yeah. And so I'm thinking when he's saying all these horrible things, I'm thinking, gosh, it sucks that no one's like helping him get to a mental hospital or he's refusing help or something like that. That's what I think. No matter how messed up what he's saying is. So you've got that. You got crazy people. Then you've got dumb people, ignorant people who don't know. So they're saying things, but they don't know that they're making stuff up. They don't know that they're lying and so on. So there you think, okay, this person just doesn't know any better. Let's try and inform this person more. Then you've got liars, so Muhammad Hijab, Ali Dawah, Sheikh Uthman, these guys are in the liar category. Daniel Hakikachu, these guys are in the liar category. We know they're lying, right? When Daniel Hakikachu says, after we've already exposed him, after we've actually shown him what the Catholic Encyclopedia says, when he then goes on and says, and the Catholic Encyclopedia says that Mary was 12. Okay, at that point, he's a liar. He's a liar. He's in the liar category, right? And I just have a completely different reaction to people in the liar category from people who are in the ignorant category or people who are in the crazy category. Sajid, over these several videos that we've gone through as he's tried to respond to the Islamic dilemma, in my mind, has definitely gone from maybe he's not well informed on this issue, but he's trying. He went into the, he's just a liar category. And so I'm not complimenting Sajid anymore, except I will compliment him on this. You're definitely helping us expose Dawah.
It sounds like you don't like him anymore, man. I don't know.
Don't like it when people have influence over others and they use that position of influence to lie to them and deceive them. That's messed up.
That is true. I mean, there was a point where both you and I thought of Sajid as an honest person, but yeah, it's very difficult to believe now at this point.
Indeed.
Sorry to interrupt here. So is each one of the apostles teaching their version of Jesus's life, and do those differ slightly? And is Christianity kind of like fracturing a little bit in those first few hundred years?
So yes and no. So this goes to your question in terms of the differentiation in detail. So the fact is we have 4 biographies, and sometimes they tell the same stories, but they give different angles on the stories. So we have a similar thing with the emperor at the time, Tiberius.
Yeah.
So the only other person who's sort of comparative to Jesus in terms of source information is the emperor. So you have Jesus, and then you have the most powerful, the most well-known, the richest person at the time.
Guys, that's a little side point. I don't know if everyone caught that. It says, in terms of source material about the person, the only person in the first century we can compare Jesus to is the Roman emperor, Tiberius. You catch what he's saying? In terms of the number of sources we have about a person, the only person in the first century we can compare Jesus to is the Roman emperor. because everyone else you'll have like a mention of them here, a mention of them there, or a little bit of a little story or something like that about the person here or there. As far as like having all this information and multiple sources and so on, and giving lots of information about the person's life and coming at it from different angles, it's Jesus and the emperor and the Roman emperor.
And he also has 4 biographies of himself, or at least 4. Don't kick that, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, not while I'm talking.
Forgive
Andrew.
me. Forgive me.
Tiberius has Vilius Paterculus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and Tacitus, who are all writing source information for him. So if we can do like a comparative analysis for someone with Jesus, the emperor is a good guy to do it because he likewise has 4 individuals who are writing about his life.
You're saying as an example of their importance and impact?
Or like, how can we look at source information? Now, the Gospels are a little bit different because they're pretty comprehensive and they're only about Jesus. Whereas these other guys are writing, say, about emperors more broadly. And so it's like snippets here and there. But what I was getting at is we have differences in those stories too. Or like Socrates.
I get what you're saying.
Socrates has 3 biographers.
Yeah, it's 3 different sports writers writing about the game. They might have different angles, but at the end of the day, this is the score, and these are how much these people played, and they're going to reference who the superstars were.
Yeah, and the detail. So I would say a differentiation in detail doesn't necessarily amount to a contradiction. So I haven't found something that I think is an outright contradiction.
That's funny. So the guy asked him originally about Bible discrepancies. Then Andrew Schultz sort of jumps in and says, explain what Gospels are. Then he goes through an explanation. He talks about covenants and so on and sources, and then gets right back to the issue.
Yeah.
I like how this guy rolls, man. So now he's going on the issue of Judas, if I recall.
That's not to say there aren't hard ones.
That's why I zeroed in on this one.
So the death of Judas is a hard one because one gospel says that he went and hung himself in the potter's field. The other says that he falls headlong and his entrails fall out. So
he falls
headlong and his insides fall out.
What does that mean? Falls headlong?
Like it falls on his head.
And his insides fall out.
Yeah.
What?
So
yeah, the idea is you would have landed on something, your guts would have spilled out.
I don't know if he's going into detail of how this is explained.
He is.
I guess he is.
He is.
But from my understanding, the two accounts don't necessarily contradict each other, right? So,
correct.
One says that he actually hung himself as a result of what he did. The other said that he eventually falls and his guts come out.
Mm-hmm.
He explodes and his guts come out and all that.
Yeah.
So both could happen one after the other. Maybe one inflicted.
Well, you can
by
hang
himself.
yourself and be hanging, and then fall, and then your guts spill out.
Yeah. Or it could happen that he is just that he hangs, and then I don't know, through divine intervention, his death is made even more grotesque or something.
So I'm familiar with those kinds of harmonizations. He actually gives a sort of a common harmonization, but then he gives a completely different one, where saying your intestines spilled out is a kind of metaphor that people back then would have understood that people don't understand now. But because it's like it had something to do with your credibility, like your credibility is like just being destroyed. But anyway, let's see.
That's what it says happens. So there are a few things going on here. I think it's entirely possible to harmonize that and say he hung himself and the rope snapped and it fell and he like it's not. You can see how you could get these kind of things, even if some people think you're playing loose and fast with that kind of thing.
Okay.
You also have the fact that in Hebraic Semitic idea, your entrails, like your intestines, are where your credibility comes from.
Got it.
So there could be a play on words.
You don't have the guts.
You don't have the guts. That's interesting. Yeah. Like guts for us means like similar to balls, but for them it meant like credibility.
To us, everything is similar to balls.
Yeah, everything is. That's because we're the men of Alzut.
Could have physically like his cut open and his intestines fell out. Yeah. But there also could have been this idea for the Jewish mindset of like, this is the guy that betrayed Jesus. of course his entrails fall out because that's where your like credibility is.
Now, could you argue that there is credibility in the authenticity of the gospels because they're
Gospels?
the gospels.
Those are my favorite.
Starts messing with them on gospels. That's messed up.
Gospel.
Hey, Andrew Schultz actually brings up, this is part I've seen. So I saw the part on Judas, and I saw this part. And that's why I wanted to use this part. Because Andrew Schultz says something here, and it's exactly what I thought the first time I read Matthew and Mark, which is when I was an atheist. And I thought the exact same thing that Andrew Schultz brings up real quick. So I want him to be able to make this point because I think it's an interesting point.
Where your like credibility is.
Now, could you argue that there is credibility in the authenticity of the gospels because they're
Gospels?
the gospels.
Those are my favorite.
Because me too. It's a cereal. Because there are differing accounts. Like if every account was identical, you don't need 4 accounts.
Yeah.
The fact that they differ slightly and they don't make the changes to make them match up offers more authenticity to me.
Well,
Two things. Those are 2 separate issues. I originally thought about the first point there, but the second point is also valid, and the second point is more valid with Muslims. The first point's more valid with like people who are thinking that all this stuff is made up. The second point is more relevant for Muslims. So it's pointing out, and I'll tell you the exact thing that I was reading that made me think this. So I was in jail. I read Matthew first, and then I read Mark. And in Matthew, when you get to the story of the Legion, the guy who Jesus cast out the demons and so on, Matthew mentions two guys who are going around the tombs and stuff like that. After I read Matthew, I read Mark. Mark talks about one guy. He talks about one guy walking around the tombs and stuff like that, saying, I am Legion. And so when I read that, I was like, wait, didn't the other guy say that didn't the other guy talk about 2 guys? Why is this guy talking about one guy? And so I went back and I'm like, oh yeah, one says 2 and one says 1. What's going on there? Now, someone might look at that and say, hey, I don't trust these because look, they're saying something different. To be clear, that is not a contradiction. That can be a matter of emphasis, as what Wes is talking about. Different authors can be emphasizing different things. Like right now, you could leave this live stream and someone could say, what were you doing? And you say, oh, I was watching David Wood. Or, someone else could watch this live stream and then go away and someone says, what were you doing? Say, oh, I was watching AP. And then someone else could leave and you say, hey, what were you doing? Oh, I was watching Wes Huff. And someone else could go along and say, oh, yeah, I was watching David and AP watch Wes Huff. You could describe it in completely different ways. Those aren't contradictions. You're emphasizing different features of things. So anyway, but I was reading that and I was like, I said what he just said. Wait a minute. This gave my theory up until that point was collusion. Basically, a bunch of people sit down and conspire to invent Christianity. And that presented a problem for the conspiracy theory. Basically, because if you got a bunch of guys sitting down and, hey, we're gonna invent this new religion, then, well, of course you're gonna be on. You're not gonna be off on any details. You're gonna be completely. The details are gonna line up completely because you're actually conspiring. So anyway, that actually seeing 2 different accounts, seeing one talk about 2 guys and the other guy talks about 1 guy, that didn't make me think, oh, I can't trust these sources. It made me think, oh, I can trust these sources more because they're independent. They're giving independent information. They're telling it from different perspectives, and they're obviously not sitting down and conspiring to invent this story. So that made me trust it more, not less. But then he goes on to point out, and this is something that I would think of later when interacting with Muslims. Muslims tend to think that people are just editing and changing the scripture as they saw fit over the centuries. So anytime you want to change something, you want to modify something, you want to insert a new doctrine, you just do it in the manuscripts. Okay, well, it never crosses anyone's mind to fix this and say, okay, well, this one says 2, this one says 1. Let's go ahead and fix that. Doesn't cross people's minds to do that. In other words, guys, it's funny. Muslims will point to these Bible discrepancies. See, you can't trust this because they say different things. Well, if it says different things and you think that's a problem, you also say that Christians felt free to change the scriptures over the centuries. So why didn't they fix that? If they're free to change it, why aren't they fixing that? Because guess what, guys? If Matthew talks about 2 people there and Mark talks about 1, and Christians never change it, it means Christians are more concerned with reliably transmitting what the sources say than with changing the sources as they see fit. The reason you don't change that is because I'm not changing the scripture. What's that mean? It means the fact that these details are all there means that they're trying to accurately preserve the scriptures, not changing them. So it's like Muslims, take your pick. If you want to say, hey, there's these Bible discrepancies, these call this stuff into question, you can't turn around then and say, oh, but your Christians just felt free to make things up over the centuries. You can't do it. You got to pick one. But they won't. They'll keep both, and they're incoherent. All right. So anyway, that's what Andrew Schultz is pointing out, and I think he's going to keep on with that a bit.
I would say
if you're gonna change it, change it.
It's sort of like the headspace of like if you're like sort of cheating on a test or like
yeah, you have to make one thing wrong to make it not look like you got it.
Well, yeah, I guess you can make that. So like,
no, I don't mean it that way. I mean it almost in the way that you're correct. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And this guy, I saw him at one point. He says he's not religious at all. He might even say it here because I don't know where I saw him. But this guy's not religious. But yeah, he's saying if you were copying a test, it's like obvious you're copying if every answer is the exact same as this other person, like the exact same answers. If you have a couple of different answers, then it doesn't look like you're copying anymore.
Because the criticism from the outside is, hey, they're just changing these things to make it look the best so that they can exert power and influence over the people that they rule.
Right.
That's the outside perspective from like an atheist, perhaps. And on the societal utility, or not even societal, but like how the power structure uses religion, right? So, but I'm like, well, okay, well, that's not a really good one if you're putting quote unquote mistakes or differences. You're like, unless they thought it was important to maintain the authenticity of these stories, so they left them in there despite the differences.
Well, if they all said the same thing, you could accuse them of collaborating and collusion.
Yeah, maybe that was a really quick way of.
Yeah, that's exactly what he was saying like 9 times, Wes.